On today's show, the Cleveland Cavaliers gave up a season high in points, and guess what? They lost. We'll talk about all about the Cavs' loss to the Pacers and more on today's episode of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. That music you're hearing on the way in is from our friends at Astro Radio. I am Chris Manning, covering the Cavs in the NBA. That man over there is Evan Damrell. He is the proprietor of Write Down Euclid. And thanks again for making us your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and also that includes YouTube. Evan, Cavs lose to the Indiana Pacers on Thursday as part of the first of a two-game Midwest road trip. They lose 135 to 126. That is a season high in points given up by the Cleveland Cavaliers. We'll get into our awards in segment 2, talk about the starting lineup in segment 3. But Evan, what is your big takeaway from Cleveland's loss here?
Well, first off, huge thank you to Danny Cunningham for filling in some space for me while I was gone for 2 episodes. Been dealing with some back issues, but my major takeaway from this game for the Cavs is just the Pacers are a team that just plays them really hard. They are a team that is kind of like the foil to how Cleveland likes to play in general, with the Pacers kind of being a bit more of a fast-paced team, and the Cavs obviously being one of the slowest teams in the league. And then also on top of that, the Pacers just played with a lot of physicality and kind of punched the Cavs in a way that they never quite responded to. Like, you saw a bit of a push in the fourth quarter, and I'll talk about that with my stat of the night, but it just kind of felt like Cleveland was constantly clawing their way back into this one, and then the Pacers would just hit them again and knock them back down and make them climb back up the ladder.
I think if you're Cleveland, you can look at this and say, hey, we only had 9 active guys, or no Jetty Osman, no Robin Lopez. Darius Garland takes a knock to his hand in this game, and we don't know the full extent of that at this time. He came back into the game after that injury and appeared to have a little taping on it. We'll see kind of what that looks like when we know more. And again, as of right now, we don't know anything in regards to what that looks like. With this game, though, I think the tempo, it just gets out of hand for Cleveland. They have a really hard time, for whatever reason, against teams like Indiana, against teams like Toronto, against these teams that can play faster. They really have a hard time dictating the tempo against teams that want to play like this. The Pacers, obviously, I think, had a lot of energy. They benefited from the quick trigger of Buddy Hield. They benefited from, just how good Tyrese Haliburton is. They were insanely hot from 3. The Pacers shot above 60% from 3 in this game. They were hot, and I think the defense, some of that's luck, some of that's just poor defense. But for whatever reason, Evan, I think you look at games like this against teams like this. This happened the last time the Cavs played the Pacers. They really struggle against teams at this pace, and I don't know exactly what to do with that, but it feels something something of a thing to me at this point.
Well, first off, the Orlando match just had 9 players suspended. That's worth noting too. As we're
9?
This. 9 players for that altercation.
Sure, okay, that's like most of your.
They have to sign emergency players or just bring up their G League squad.
Sure.
But,
okay.
Sorry to break our brains here, but I agree. The Pacers do just play faster than the Cavs in general, and they play that's I think that's just something Cleveland can take notes with. Like, you saw Isaac Okoro be very effective in this game when the Cavs are kind of playing with fast and a little bit more pace, and I think that's a way just to unlock Okoro a little bit more, and it kind of maybe makes a stronger argument for Isaac Okoro to start over Lamar Stevens. But also, when you look at teams like Indiana, you mentioned Toronto, that's a great example. I think even Dallas as well, even though the Cavs have
Dallas
beaten the
without
Mavericks
Luka.
both times. Yeah, Dallas without Luka. Yeah. But also even Dallas with Luka in the first time they played them. Like, teams that are just faster and also play with more of a perimeter. Obviously, Luka, they're a little bit slower.
Yeah,
but just including the Mavericks in the example.
Yeah, the Luka Mavs are they're a little different.
Yep.
Yeah,
but teams that have very heavy in very frequent perimeter-based attacks like Indiana, like Toronto, which, let's remember, folks, the Raptors were not shooting well from 3. Then they play Cleveland and annihilate the Cavs from the 3-point line. That's just teams exploiting one of the biggest weaknesses and flaws on this Cavs roster is your top two perimeter defenders right now in this juncture is Lamar Stevens and Isaac Okoro, and then Evan Mobley when he's forced to defend in space, but the Cavs are asking him to do a lot other things on defense at times too. So it's just really hard to see like how this Cavs team works, but you're also seeing teams really exploit one of the biggest weaknesses the Cavs deal with, and it's one, they play slow, and two, they do not have a lot of ample-bodied perimeter defenders that kind of just coexist with everything else they're trying to do.
I'm curious to see just like what adjustments they do decide to make. Like I think there has to be some ideas about how to deal with some of this. And like, look, you can just look at this and say like Indiana got hot. We trust the process. We trust the results. Like Danny, friend of the program, Danny Cunningham pointed out that like teams are shooting like 57% from three against the Cavs over this recent stretch. Like that's not going to hold. Like that is crazy, obviously. And it's a couple games in a row where teams have shot better from three than they did overall, which is just like a hard thing to beat. Math is, tricky. Like Indiana made 7 more threes than the Cavs did in this game. They made 6 more free throws. Those are big advantages. I also I can't help but watching this game, and it's like I watch Buddy Hield. Like he makes the fastest 3-pointer in NBA history to open this game. And when he gets the ball in his hands, he lets it fly. He is just like dynamic, and it opens up so much. The Cavs don't have anyone in the realm of who shoots in the same way Buddy Hield, except for like Donovan Mitchell, like and Garland. But Garland's a little bit different. None of their role players, let's say, shoot the ball in the same way Buddy Hield does, and they lack this just like gear. And then there's like it's seemingly some like even though JB Bickerstaff has said like we want to play faster, sometimes it feels like they don't like know how to play that tempo yet. Like Mitchell forced a couple things late in this game. It's just like this just feels like an uncomfortable mode for them, and maybe they'll grow into it. But like this is like this, if you're gonna play the Cavs and you're saying okay, what's our game plan to beat them? I think pushing the pace is like kind of got to be up there in one of those things right now.
And it's an interesting thought exercise for sure because Jared Allen was asked about this a while back. I think it's when they're playing Dallas at home. Jetty Osman was stunned that the Cavs are last in the league in terms of pace, and then Jared Allen was asked about it, and he's like, it's kind of indicative of how we function as a team because we do rely on Evan Mobley and him, as in Jared Allen, just as setting up and being part of the offense and the defense, and the Cavs function better when they play bigger in half-court sets like that. So I think it's a fair point. I think it's just maybe the Cavs are trying to do too many things at once, and like, yeah, they are more comfortable in half-court sets right now. They have been very effective in half-court sets, and now it's just trying to develop and grow and add this wrinkle when, one, you don't have a ton of practice time, and two, it's hard to really just kind of like throw that completely out there when you're trying to integrating it into the rest of what works for you offensively.
Yeah. All right, let's go on a break. We'll come back. We're going to dive into our game awards, discuss the MVP, our stat of the night, and our play of the night. But Evan, you first have an ad read for us.
Today's episode of Locked On Cavs is brought to you by the NHTSA. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, your parents can tell, these two podcast hosts can tell, everyone can tell. So what makes you think that law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, trust me, you're not. Because the bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI. This ad was paid for by the NHTSA.
All right, we're back here on the Locked On Cavs podcast. Evan, who is your MVP?
I'll just say up front, I have like a co-MVP. Karis LeVert is just looking really good, more comfortable at the bench in this game. I think that's encouraging as you're trying to make him your super six man, and that's what Bickerstaff wants. But for me, like the main MVP was Evan Mobley for the better part of this game. He was just super impactful. He filled the stat sheet, almost had a triple-double just in terms of points, rebounds, and assists. He had a couple steals. He didn't have any blocks, and he kind of played through some of the what Indiana gave them, like them as in the Cavs physically. But yeah, it's a co-MVP for me tonight, and with Evan Mobley and Karis LeVert. Who's yours?
I think those are good picks. Like I think like Mobley was like maybe my initial pick. It's even though the assist stuff with him is really impressive, and it's like maybe you go there. I think you could do that. I think LeVert is a reasonable pick too. This is one of his better games of late, and he was one of the guys I think really trying to push the tempo in a way that was interesting. It kind of led to some funky decisions in how the offense worked late in this game, but that is what it is. I am just going to like be a loser and pick Donovan Mitchell because he had 28 points and he was kind of like the one kind of providing juice late in this game. Like he was kind of the only guy, if like down the stretch, like willing to just like put his foot on the gas and take these big shots. So I go him. I don't feel great about picking anyone really. Like you could pick Garland because he was just hyper efficient and like had 8 assists versus 1 turnover, like all of this stuff. But kind of a blah night for most players. Okay, let's go to stat of the night. Evan, I mentioned this at the top. This is the most points the Cavs have given up all year. 135 is a new high. Here's the other high point totals for the Cavs in terms of what they've given up this year. November 13th, they gave up 129 in a loss to the Wolves. November 9th, they gave up 127 in a loss to the Kings. Just the other day against the Nets, they gave up 125 in that loss. Gave up 123 in a win at Boston on October 18th, and then they gave up 122 in a win against the Hornets on November 18th. So this is like an anomaly to some degree. This is like a very high total, but it's telling to me that like it's not a surprise to me. Let's say that like they're now top 4 point given, like the most points given to a game. The top 4 times they've given the most points given up over 4 games. They've lost those games. This is not the style this team wants to play. This is not the style that they are equipped to play. So that's it for me. It's just they gave up. They just like I have the more and more this game got kind of out of control, and like the Pacers had going that comeback, and it's like okay, Cavs are absolutely gonna give up the most points given up all the season, or at least get close. Once it felt like that, I was like, I feel like there's a lesser chance they win this game, and that's where it went.
I think that's a fair analysis. I think that's just kind of the counterintuitive and just not what they want to be as a defensive team. But I also do wonder if it's the Cavs coming back down to earth a little bit just after such a hot start to the season, and also teams just kind of easing their ways into the heydays of the NBA season, and also teams are just getting in better shape. They're clicking more, and like I think maybe the Pacers caught the Cavs at a bad time because they are reeling a little bit, especially after those 2 pretty bad losses before and after Christmas in terms of just the grand scheme of how things work. But it is something worth monitoring for sure. Maybe opposing teams smell blood on the water for a team that already has a target on their back with how they performed last year, and now they acquired Donovan Mitchell. So it's definitely worth watching. But my stat of the night's a bit of a throwaway, but at least I found it interesting. Jared Allen has 14 double-doubles this season, and according to the Cavs stats team, currently leads the team in that statistic. And the Cavs are 10-4 when that happens. So, hey, you get Jared Allen some rebound. Let him just have an impact defensively, which he had all night long against the Pacers, but gobble up rebounds and it cancel second chance opportunities as well as keeping him engaged in the offense. It seems to be an indicator of success. And another co-stat for me is it's just wild to me that the Cavs opened the fourth quarter on a 10-0 run and then somehow lost it. Like it felt like the Cavs had the game back in their control right when the first quarter break just happened, or fourth quarter break just happened. Pardon me.
Yeah, no, it's kind of this is one of those times where, like on the road, you'd like to hear what the vibe is in the media session, just considering I bet you this is one of those like short ones and it's a little bit curt, let's say. Okay, let's go to play of the night. Evan, we have the same one. So 1:30 left. Okoro get the dunk. This happens because Donovan Mitchell gets stopped. He picks up the ball, picks up his dribble, throws the ball off the backboard to try and get himself an ooper, keep the play alive. Okoro cuts and gets a dunk and just absolutely crushes a dunk. They just kind of mucked up a bucket there, and they just needed one. This is like I believe a possession after they tried to run double drag, and Mitchell just like dribbled into the defender and just like kind of destroyed the whole flow of the possession. Like they just needed a bucket. Also incredible that Donovan Mitchell got away with a blatant travel that pissed off Rick Carlisle so much that Rick Carlisle got ejected. Just amazing sequence here.
It was by and far a travel. I think the fact that the officials did call goaltending on Cleveland as well at one point too was kind of like
love to burn a challenge on a Kevin Love charge in the second quarter, and then not have it on an obvious goaltending call late in the game.
Yeah, so like it's both ends of the spectrum, and maybe those 2 points do change the trajectory for Cleveland. The Cavs did have a challenge available. I don't know. Yeah, it was just a blatant travel, but it was just an exciting play. And like that's an example for me where like you can make Isaac Okoro functional in like half court sets, I guess, but more so just like fast break opportunities and letting him use that speed of his, that strength of his, and most of all like that those hops of his. Like he just has such an explosive motor that the Cavs could lean into that a little bit and make Isaac Okoro a bit more functional of a player offensively.
He generally played like very good, and he's been playing very well
tonight. Yeah.
Um, like he's just like kind of settled into being like I think like a competent NBA player.
Mm-hmm. It's wild to think that gross overreactions off the first 5 to 10 games of the season are a little bit hyperbolic at times. And here's my hot take to wrap up this segment. I think
Mhm.
Isaac Okoro should definitely be starting at the 3 for Cleveland, and maybe you find a way to reduce Lamar Stevens' minutes in the rotation because I like Lamar as a person. It's just, and he was functional tonight against Indiana on offense at times compared to the last time they played the Pacers when he gave them 0 points. But I just think you want to award Okoro playing better instead of maybe trying just leaning on what you know a little bit more, just because Stevens has those chops of starting in the starting 5 with Mobley and Allen in particular.
Yeah, we're gonna come back to that topic in segment 3, but let's continue on Okoro for a second and just his night because I think it's notable. 21 minutes, 4-4 from the field, doesn't take a 3, but 2-2 from the line, 3 boards, 2 assists, zero steals, 0 turnovers, 10 points, plus minus of 7, which would be the highest on the team as far as single game plus minus goes. Um, I find just the way he's playing lately to be he just feels more confident. There's been times I think where we've seen him look very kind of caught in between like what he's trying to do and forcing things. I think that's kind of where Lamar Stevens is right now to some degree. He feels kind of caught in between two different versions of how he wants to play. I feel like with Okoro right now, like he is punishing guys on defense. You're getting the best version of him there. And then on the other end, like you saw him make a play in this game where he drove in and just kind of muscled his defender and got on the assist to cutting Jaron Allen off of it. And it's like, okay, like this is a guy that is playing with a little more confidence, a little more verve, a little more juice. And like I don't totally understand. Like him and Lamar ultimately play like similar minutes. That is what it is. I understand like the impulse to say we want like a bigger body on the wing. I just I don't I think you're correct, and I just Okoro feels like a guy who's probably played himself into a little bit more minutes in some regard, and maybe you're worried about how he's going to play with Rubio and all of that. Like I get that, but I just don't see how he hasn't looked better than some of the other options they had of late, especially on that where he's shorthanded. And like maybe and like look, if there's ever a game where you're just going to throw Okoro out there and like have him like just be himself, maybe it's the game where you want to throw him on Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah, or even Buddy Hield, or even Benedict Mathurin, or even Aaron Nesmith. Like the Pacers exploited a huge weakness, like I said in the first segment. Like they just attacked the Cavs on the perimeter. I think this is a night, where you give Isaac Okoro more minutes, and maybe yes, Caris LeVert was cooking on offense, but Caris LeVert also got worked on defense a few times too. Maybe you give a few more minutes to Okoro in the future, but to kind of counter your point with Rubio, I do wonder if Rubio helps Okoro maintain a little bit of that balance too, because Rubio was a player that played with a lot of juice. He played and gave the Cavs a little bit of pace when he ran those bench units, and like it'd be fun to see, let's just say, Kevin Love, Evan Mobley, Isaac Okoro, Ricky Rubio, and Donovan Mitchell on the floor together for possessions, especially when Rubio's fully healthy and doesn't really have like a minutes restriction or anything, just because there's a lot of like wrinkles and ways you can run things, and like the Cavs could just play fast with that lineup, and I think that'd be fun too. But yeah, I understand like your reservations maybe with this, but I am curious to see like maybe Rubio does a little bit of his magic that he did with Osman and Love to start the season last year and kind of keeps his confidence rolling with Isaac Okoro, so we can see a little bit more of a complete NBA rotation player out there.
No, I think that's right. Okay, one last break. We'll come back. We're going to dive into who should be the Cavs starting 3 in detail. That's going to be our whole segment to wrap up this episode. But first, got to tell everyone about Rocket Money. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Are you wasting money on subscriptions? 80% of people have subscriptions they forgot about. Maybe for you, it's an unused Amazon Prime account or a Hulu account that never gets streamed. There's this great app that I use, helps me track all my expenses, and because of it, I no longer waste money on subscriptions I don't even use. You might have heard of it. It's called Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill. The app shows you all your subscriptions in one place and cancels what you don't want for you. Rocket Money can even find subscriptions you didn't know you're paying for. You even find out you've been double charged for a subscription. To cancel a subscription, all you have to do is press cancel, and Rocket Money takes care of the rest. Testimonials back this up. The Twitter user @TheLibertyHB said, yes, wholeheartedly, an intuitive money app is hard to come by. Get it. A survey responder said, best app I've ever used. Cancel unnecessary subscriptions with Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Seriously, it could save you hundreds per year. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, last segment. Locked on Cavs.
Taking off to save you money, folks.
That's right. Okay, so Evan, I think part of the journey the Cavs are on this year is figuring out like what the right pieces at the three between Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, and Allen. We know that those four guys for the foreseeable future are those are the four. Those are the guys. Those are penned into the starting lineup as long as they're healthy. I think there's like some clear ideas about like what you'd want in a three, but also like I think people have to remember. There's also just there are like you're in a situation with this where there's limits on money.
Mm-hmm.
There's limits on assets you can spend on some of these things. Like your fit at the three is not going to be like a perfect player. Odds are like maybe you luck into someone who just fits the role perfectly, but it's really really tricky to find that player. Of the option the Cavs have now, I tend to think that Dean Wade is probably your best option for everything you need. A little bit bigger, and I think they clearly want a little bit of size in that spot. I think that's why they go to Lamar, but he gives you better shooting, more willing shooting.
That's the big one for me is shooting.
Yeah, but he also attacks closeouts. And is he like a worse defender than Lamar? Probably, but is Lamar significantly better than him and it makes a difference? I would say no. I think where we're at with this, Evan, is I think Dean, and he's obviously hurt, so that contributes to this. But I think he and Okoro are both better options than Stevens at this point. Like the lineups with Stevens have not worked. They're winning games with that starting lineup. Starting lineups wins are not a stat. Like nothing else about those lineups is really working.
Well, they are technically a stat, but like it doesn't.
But it's
really
not
give
like
you a
it's like
scope
quarter.
of how
It's
it
like
works.
quarterback. It's like quarterback wins. Quarterback wins are not like a real. Yeah, those are like
that's
like,
what I'm saying. It just doesn't give you a full scope of how like it's functioning on the floor for you.
So that is where I just think I would, if it was me, I would be going in a different direction.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think right now, if you're JB Bickerstaff or just this coaching staff in general, like with Dean Wade out, with Jetty Osman at least out for this Pacers game, you're kind of making chicken salad out of chicken crap in this situation where you're trying to make the most of a bad situation. And I'll maintain the stance that the permanent three, or at least for this season, the permanent three is not on this roster for this Cavs squad. Like they can make it work with Dean Wade and Isaac Okoro, with Dean Wade starting and Isaac Okoro getting more minutes, and then you parse out the minutes with Karis LeVert mostly playing the two, but some time at the three, and Jetty Osman playing a little bit of the 2, 3, 4, and Lamar Stevens may be playing 3 and the 4 as well. But it's tough. I think when this Cavs team is a little bit more healthy, I do think adding Rubio back at least kind of makes the bench units a little bit more palatable and it kind of brings you a little bit more balance on the offensive side of the ball. But it's tough because I think just because the Cavs have so much footage now out there of Mobley and Allen playing together, like teams are finding ways to make sure that Mobley and Allen can have an impact on a nightly basis defensively, but they kind of mitigate the threat those two possess defensively, because the Cavs' strategy at the end of the day is, okay, sure, we want teams to funnel into the paint, so they have to deal with our two-headed monster in the interior of Mobley and Allen, and teams are just like, nah, I don't think so. I think we're just going to stay out on the perimeter and kind of dare those two to defend us in space, and Mobley has shown signs of being very good at that. I just don't know how fully comfortable he is doing that, and it's just weird. Like, this is just not a roster that is constructed to play the modern style of basketball, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But I think I have to give a little bit of credit to the coaching staff to find ways to make it work. It's just, one, the Cavs are a bad road team, and two, they just have a lot of issues at the 3 spot. Like, this was a question coming into the season, and it will remain a question until it is addressed either the trade deadline or next offseason.
What I think you're looking for now is, like, let's say Lamar keeps starting, and I don't think that's like off the table. I think it's clear that there's something JB likes about Lamar starting at the 3. I think like a fair question to him, like, and would be like, okay, what do you like about Lamar with the starters? Like, what about it makes you keep going back to that? I think that's like a fair question to kind of dialogue with him at this point in that regard.
I agree.
Yeah. Lamar, if he's in those spots, has to like shoot. Like he's getting looks in the corner where like he needs to just like shoot the threes that are presented to him. Like he just has to let them fly. Like it is just Okoro has now started to do that. Like Mobley when he's left wide open, even though he hasn't made his last few, is like letting those shots fly. Dean Wade, I guarantee, will let those shots fly when he's on the court. Like that is Dean Wade's going to do some stuff. Like
it's gonna
Lamar,
take. I think it's gonna take time with Dean Wade, but
like whenever
when
he's
he is
back
more
and like we'll see if he can
when
stay
he's
healthy.
when he's physically good and when he just feels comfortable playing the starting five, he's gonna do a lot. Not a lot, but like he's gonna provide you 3-point shooting and spacing. That's what you need Dean Wade to do on offense. But it's gonna take time for that to happen, of course.
Well, but even beyond that, it's like you watch Lamar when he like Okoro. Okay, so we mentioned that Okoro drive earlier. Dean Wade, when he drives, like has the ability to dunk on you. He has the ability to make some things happen when he drives. Right now, Stevens looks like unsure of what to do. He gets into the lane. He is the absolute king of like pump fake, fly by, close out, flies by him. He gets into the baseline and like mess and like doesn't do anything with the ball. He passes the ball to Mitchell. They have to reset, and then like you have like 10 seconds left on the shot clock, and you're trying to manufacture something out of there. Like that obviously that can happen with anyone. Like that. This is just like sometimes it happens. But with Stevens, it's like I almost expect that to happen. And with Okoro right now, it's like he's exceeding that a little bit. Where like I think he's at least going to try to make something happen. I think Dean Wade will probably make something happen. With Stevens, it's like it's just like recycling. And in a sport where like you have 24 seconds on your shot clock, you have a condensed amount of time. That is really hard to do that really well. And like yes, you have Mitchell and you have Garland who can create their own shot and all that stuff, but you're making it harder on yourself when you rely on that. Or when that is something that you're like saying we can live with this. We're gonna live on these guys bailing us out. That can work. That has obviously worked. Like Mitchell will create something out of nothing. Garland can do it too. Maybe they'll win a playoff game on something like that where Mitchell just creates like a pull-up three-pointer look for himself out of nothing and they win a game and it's a big moment. That can happen. That is the beauty of individual players sometimes in this game. I think if you're just like trying to make your offense as good as possible, you're making it a lot harder on yourself than you should when you kind of are willing to take when you're saying this is like an acceptable offensive output from our starting three. I think you're really capping kind of what you could be, and it's hard to be really really good and fight off teams like Brooklyn, who's playing phenomenal basketball right now, to even just win on the road against teams like Indiana, to kind of make your presence felt in this crowded East. It's just a tricky place to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I kind of agree with your point. Well, at least in like a playoff series, just in a game by game basis, it's tough. Like I don't expect. Like, the Cavs could win a game or two with just, like, Donovan Mitchell heroics or Darius Garland just doing something absolutely crazy. We've seen both of them do that before this season and in years past with the Cavs and Garland and Utah and Mitchell. But I do wonder as well if it's just, like, the Cavs are kind of waiting for Evan Mobley to take that leap as well offensively, maybe demand the ball a bit more. Like I said, shout out to him for being so impactful just across the box score and just making his impact felt everywhere on the floor tonight. But like you also maybe want Mobley scoring more than like that 12 to 15 point range he's kind of just stuck in right now. You want him to kind of grow up past that. Maybe you want him taking more 3-pointers as well. Like I've read folks saying like, oh, and he needs to take less threes and get down low and bang with the big boys, but I just don't think Mobley's wired like that as a player, and I just wonder if the Cavs kind of need maybe a third legitimate offensive threat just to kind of like carry the load sometimes, especially if there's a team that just is being stymied, especially if like Garland, who now has a hand issue on his shooting hand, like he had tape on his right hand as his shooting hand, he could be out for a bit. He could miss the next few games because of it, and like teams that will just zero in on Donovan Mitchell and say, okay, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, we dare you to try and beat us. And like it works against teams like the Pistons, but when you are playing the Chicago Bulls, who are great, but they still have talent, and then you play the Phoenix Suns and the Denver Nuggets next week, like that's a formula for disaster, not a recipe for success at the end of the day. And I don't know. I just don't think the Cavs have it on their roster right now unless they just like do by committee stuff just in order to get some serious scoring options out there.
I think you have to do by committee, and I think like your options right now are like it's Dean Wade, and I think it's the version of Okoro we've seen, and I think you make the most we have there, and like the Mobley passing stuff could be a really big deal. I don't think you can bank on him being a 3-point shooter. Maybe we at some point we should have like a discussion about like where Mobley is at. I think that's like a fair development question, a podcast for us to do. But like he had 7 assists against 3 turnovers in this game, One of the turnovers was like a really bad kind of forced pass inside, but like he had a very good passing night. And I think for me, it's like I like if you could put any player in the league, I don't like, what does this offense look like with Bojan Bogdanovic as the 3, right? What does this offense look like? More functional. There's like a case sometimes to be like, throw Jetty Osman and just let him shoot threes. And like, yes, you're gonna have defensive issues, but like you will function better with Jetty spacing to the corner, and he will take those shots. I would bet my life that Jetty Osman is not gonna pass up an open 3-point shot when the ball swings his way, right? Like you need something out of that. And they've tried LeVert. That didn't work. I think they sampled Dean Wade. He's now out. You're now kind of going through this Lamar Stevens thing, and I don't think that's working, but they're kind of sticking with it. We'll see how long they kind of do stick with it. It's telling me that this was like the game, I think, to maybe go back to Okoro, and you didn't, and that to me is kind of telling. We'll see where this goes. This is going to be an ongoing thing until the Cavs like do something or find a player or draft someone and develop someone
Luke
that solves this
come
issue.
On down.
Yeah, Luke Travers, with the mullet and all. Maybe.
Okay. I thought you were going somewhere else with this, but yeah. Okay.
Where did you think I was going? I was not. Where did you think I was going?
Who he follows on Twitter, and you sent me a screenshot.
I'm not. No. I am not doing that on for these airwaves. That is. No.
Real quick. The pool report came out on the Donovan Mitchell travel. Why was Donovan Mitchell not called for traveling during the possession in which he passed the ball to himself off the backboard? Rick Carlisle thought that was a travel. Why was that not a travel? Answer: it is a legal play by rule for a player to throw the ball off the backboard and be the first one to gain possession. Question: should there have been a travel after it looked like maybe he hopped after he caught it? Upon review, when we got into the locker room, we see that there was a hop step. Why was Rick Carlisle ejected? He aggressively charged in the direction of the official when he received the first technical foul, and it did not dissolve. He continued the act while clapping the direction in official. He was given a second tech. So there you have it, folks. Donovan Mitchell did travel, according to the officials after the fact.
Fun stuff. Thanks again for making us your first listen every day. This episode was produced by Jake Stevens. Have a happy New Year, everyone. We'll be back shortly. And thanks
See you next year.
Cavs lost, but fun win. We'll talk about it next time. More about it next time. Bye-bye.